The desert wind howled like a distant engine, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and sun-baked earth across the cracked asphalt of Route 66. It was just past midnight when the old pickup truck veered off the shoulder, its headlights slicing through the darkness like accusatory beams. Inside, a blind boy named Elias clutched the edge of the seat, his small hands trembling. He was 8 years old, his world forever shrouded in shadow since birth, but tonight fear painted vivid strokes across his mind's canvas. The truck belonged to his uncle, a man with a temper as volatile as the storms that swept these parts, and Elias had learned to sense the shift in the air, the way the engine's rumble grew erratic, mirroring the rage building behind the wheel. A sharp curse cut through the cab, followed by the screech of tires as the vehicle lurched to a halt on the empty stretch. Elias's heart pounded. He knew what came next, the rough shove, the abandonment under the indifferent stars. "Stay put, kid," his uncle growled, the door slamming like a judge's gavel. Footsteps faded into the night, leaving Elias alone with the cooling metal and the vast, silent void. From the horizon, a low thunder rolled, not of weather, but of machines. A lone motorcycle crested the rise, its single headlight piercing the gloom like a beacon of reluctant hope. At the handlebars sat Jax Harlan, leader of the Iron Vipers, a weathered man in his late 40s whose leather vest bore the scars of forgotten battles and the emblem of a promise etched in faded ink, a coiled serpent guarding a flame. Jax had ridden these roads for decades, chasing ghosts since the day his wife Lena slipped away 15 years ago in a hospital bed that smelled of antiseptic and regret. He rode to outrun the ache, the what-ifs that clung like exhaust fumes. Tonight, the call of the road had pulled him from a dingy motel bar where the jukebox played old blues and the whiskey burned away memories. Spotting the stalled truck and the small figure huddled beside it, Jax slowed, his bike's growl softening to a wary purr. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the boy's soft whimpers. Dismounting with the creak of boots on gravel, Jax approached, his shadow falling long across the boy. "Hey, kid," he said, voice gravelly from years of wind and smoke. "You all right?" Elias flinched at the stranger's voice, his unseeing eyes wide with terror. He could smell the leather and motor oil, hear the faint jingle of chains on the man's belt, a far cry from his uncle's sour sweat and cheap cologne. He left me," Elias whispered, his voice cracking like dry earth. "Said I'd slow him down." Jax's jaw tightened. He'd seen too many like this uncle, men who discarded what they couldn't control. Kneeling to the boy's level, he placed a calloused hand on Elias's shoulder, gentle as a vow unspoken. In that moment, something stirred in Jax, an echo of Lena's kindness, the way she'd always stopped for strays on their rides through the canyons. He couldn't leave the kid here, prey to the coyotes or the cold. "Not tonight," Jax murmured. "Come on, I'll get you somewhere safe." With Elias perched awkwardly on the bike's rear, arms wrapped tight around Jax's waist, they roared toward the nearest town, the wind whipping tears from the boy's face. Tears of fear giving way to fragile trust. Dawn painted the sky in bruised purples as they pulled into Willow Creek, a dusty speck on the map where the Iron Vipers clubhouse hunkered like a fortress of rusted chrome and loyalty. The compound buzzed faintly even at this hour. A few early risers tinkered with engines, the air thick with the tang of gasoline and fresh coffee. Jax eased Elias inside, the boy navigating by touch and sound, his fingers tracing the worn wooden beams as if mapping a new world. The Vipers were a brotherhood forged in fire, veterans, outcasts, men who'd traded badges for patches after wars that left them hollow. Jax had led them for a decade, his word law, his silences profound. He settled Elias in the common room, wrapping him in a blanket that still carried the faint scent of desert pine. "What's your name, son?" Jax asked, pouring a mug of something warm. "Elias," the boy replied, sipping cautiously. I can't see, but I draw sometimes, with my hands." Jax nodded, though the boy couldn't witness it. a flicker of curiosity piercing his guarded heart. Word spread like wildfire through the club. By mid-morning the Vipers gathered, their bikes lined up like sentinels outside. Jax recounted the night's find over breakfast, simple fare of eggs and bacon sizzling on a griddle, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of resolve. "Kids alone. Family's no good. We don't turn our backs on that." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. These were men who knew abandonment, who had built their family from the wreckage of old ones. Elias, sensing the shift, reached for a scrap of paper and charcoal from the table, his movements deliberate, fingers dancing across the surface as if guided by an inner light. The room fell quiet, watches ticking, breaths held. What emerged was no child's scribble but a portrait, delicate lines capturing a woman's face, soft curls framing eyes that sparkled with quiet strength, a smile that curved like a winding road at sunset. Jax froze, the mug slipping from his grip to shatter on the floor. It was Lena, impossible, yet unmistakable. The tilt of her head, the faint scar on her cheek from a long-ago spill on the back of his bike. 15 years gone, her image preserved only in Jax's mind, and a single faded photo tucked in his saddlebag. Elias tilted his head, unseeing but serene. "She told me to draw her," he said simply. "In my dreams. Said you'd know." The room blurred for Jax as tears, hot, unbidden, carved tracks down his weathered cheeks. He hadn't wept since her funeral, since the day he swore to carry her memory like a shield. Now this blind boy, this stranger pulled from the night, had bridged the chasm of loss with strokes of charcoal. The Vipers watched their leader break, not in weakness, but in the raw unraveling of a promise long buried. Jax knelt again, pulling Elias into an embrace that smelled of oil and unspoken grief. "How?" he whispered, but the boy only smiled. "She said it's time to ride again, for both of us." In that clubhouse, amid the hum of brotherhood and the ghosts of roads untraveled, a new pact formed. Jax rose, wiping his face with the back of his hand, his eyes steeling with purpose. The drawing, now cradled like a relic, became the spark. Calls went out across the network, texts pinging into the ether, voices crackling over lines to old allies from dusty chapters. The Iron Vipers would ride, not for vengeance, but for redemption, to uncover how a blind boy's vision pierced the veil, to honor a woman whose love outlasted death, and to weave a lost child into the fabric of chosen family. As the sun climbed higher, engines revved in the yard, a convoy assembling under the watchful eye of the serpent flame. Elias's hand found Jax's, small fingers intertwining with scarred ones. The road ahead whispered of secrets, of corruption lurking in the shadows of small-town power, and a moral fire that no darkness could extinguish. For Jax Harlan, the ride had just begun, not to flee the past, but to fulfill its quiet call. The sun hung low over Willow Creek like a judgment, casting long shadows across the Iron Viper's compound as the first engines coughed to life. Jax Harlan stood at the edge of the gravel yard, the charcoal drawing of Lena clutched in his fist, its edges curling slightly from the heat of his grip. The paper felt alive against his skin, as if her presence lingered in the faint smudges of black, defying the 15 years that had turned her memory into a hollow echo. Elias sat nearby on a weathered bench, his small frame dwarfed by the massive forms of the bikers milling about. Men with tattoos mapping old wounds, their faces etched by roads that forgave nothing. The boy tilted his head toward the growing rumble, a faint smile playing on his lips, as if he could see the assembly through the symphony of revving motors and shifting gears. Jax's second-in-command, Rocco, a burly veteran with a salt-and-pepper beard and eyes that had stared down desert storms, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Boss, you sure about this? Kid's a mystery wrapped in a miracle, but riding out for answers. That's stirring up dust we might not want to settle." Rocco's voice was a low rumble, laced with the caution of a man who'd lost brothers to rash oaths. Jax met his gaze, the weight of leadership settling heavier than any saddlebag. He'd built the Vipers on promises, sworn in blood and chrome after the war that stole pieces of them all. Lena had been his anchor then, her laughter cutting through the nightmares like sunlight on rusted metal. Now, this boy's impossible sketch had cracked open that vault, forcing Jax to confront the vow he'd buried, to live with honor, not just survive. "I ain't sure of much anymore," Jax admitted, his voice rough as gravel under tires. But she spoke through him. That's no coincidence. "We ride to find out why." He glanced at Elias, who was tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick, his fingers moving with the same ethereal precision as when he'd captured Lena's likeness. The club had already buzzed with whispers. Some called it a sign from the beyond, others a trick of the light. But Jax knew better. In their world, miracles were just debts coming due. He knelt beside the boy, the scent of warm earth and oil rising between them. "Elias, you said she told you to draw her. What else? In your dreams, I mean." The boy paused, his unseeing eyes lifting as if searching the horizon. The air hummed with the distant call of a hawk, mirroring the tension coiling in Jax's chest. "She said you're carrying a fire that's almost out," Elias replied softly, his words carrying an otherworldly calm. "And there's trouble coming, shadows in the town, hiding what they took. She wants you to light it up again. For me." Jax's breath caught. Shadows in the town. Willow Creek had always been a quiet place, a pit stop for wanderers, but lately rumors had trickled in like bad gasoline. Corrupt officials turning blind eyes to the vulnerable, families torn apart by greed masked as law. Elias's uncle, that snake who dumped the boy like trash, was just the tip. Whispers spoke of a network preying on the lost, funneling kids into the system for profit, all under the guise of protection. By noon, the convoy swelled to 20 bikes, chrome gleaming under the relentless sun like armor forged for a righteous war. The Vipers weren't outlaws in the old sense. They were guardians of the forgotten, their rides a testament to loyalty that blood couldn't break. Jax mounted his Harley, the familiar vibration thrumming through his bones as Elias climbed on behind, secured with a spare jacket tied like a harness. The boy's arms wrapped around Jax's waist, small but steady, a fragile bridge across the years. "Hold tight, kid," Jax said, twisting the throttle. The engine roared in response, a beast awakening. They led the pack out of the compound, tires kicking up dust clouds that swirled like vengeful spirits, the serpent flame patch on Jax's back catching the light, a promise reignited. The road to the heart of Willow Creek wound through canyons scarred by time, red rock walls rising like silent witnesses. Jax's mind raced ahead, piecing together fragments from the past. 15 years ago, Lena had volunteered at the local shelter, her hands gentle with the broken, until one night she uncovered something rotten, a ring of officials siphoning funds meant for orphans, leaving kids like Elias to fend in the cracks. She'd confronted them, her moral fire blazing, but an accident on a rain-slick road claimed her life days later. Jax had ridden away then, drowning grief in miles, vowing never to look back. But now, with Elias's drawing burning a hole in his vest, the past clawed its way forward. Was this boy a pawn in the same game? Abandoned not by chance, but design. They pulled into the town's edge as the afternoon heat shimmered the asphalt, the convoy's growl drawing stares from porch-sitters and shopkeepers. Willow Creek's main street was a faded postcard, boarded windows, a diner with peeling paint, and the squat brick of the county office looming at the end like a false sentinel. Jax cut the engine first, the silence heavy with anticipation. Dismounting, he lifted Elias down, the boy's feet touching ground with a soft crunch. "This is where it starts," Jax murmured, more to himself. Rocco and the others fanned out, their presence a wall of quiet intimidation, leathers creaking as they scanned the faces peering from behind curtains. Inside the diner, the air was thick with grease and suspicion. Jax ordered coffees for the group, Elias perched on a stool beside him, fingers drumming a rhythm only he could hear. The waitress, a wiry woman named Mira, with lines of hard living around her eyes, slid the mugs over with a knowing glance. "Heard you found a stray last night," she said, voice low. "That uncle of his, he's tied up with the wrong crowd. County Protector's Office, man named Harlan Tate. Wait, same last name?" Her eyes widened at Jax's nod, a flicker of recognition sparking. Tate, Jax's own distant cousin, a badge-wearing snake who'd climbed the ranks on lies and leverage. The connection hit like a backfire, twisting Jax's gut. Corruption in the family tree, branches rotten to the core. As the vipers settled, Elias's hand brushed Jax's arm. "She's here too," the boy whispered, nodding toward the window. Outside, a faded mural on the diner's wall caught the light. A woman on a bike, curls whipping in the wind, painted years ago in Lena's honor by locals who'd loved her fire. Jax's throat tightened. The drawing wasn't the only bridge. It was a call to arms, pulling him into the fray. Tate's office was next. Time to demand answers, not with fists, but with the unyielding truth of a promise kept. The moral storm brewed, engines idling like hearts on the edge, ready to thunder toward justice. But in the shadows of small-town power, secrets guarded themselves fiercely, and Jax knew the ride would test every scar, every vow, forging redemption from the ashes of loss. The diner's bell tinkled like a warning as Jax pushed through the door, the midday sun slamming into his back with the force of an unanswered question. Willow Creek's main street baked under its glare, the asphalt rippling like a mirage, carrying the faint, acrid tang of overheated rubber from parked trucks. Elias walked beside him, one hand light on Jax's belt loop, his step sure despite the blindness, as if the town's pulse guided him through the unseen maze. Rocco and a handful of vipers trailed at a respectful distance, their boots thudding softly on the wooden sidewalk, shadows merging into one formidable silhouette. The County Protector's Office squatted at the street's end, a squat building of faded brick, its windows tinted against prying eyes, the American flag drooping lazily from a pole that creaked in the dry breeze. Jax's mind churned like an engine on low idle, the revelation of Harlan Tate's name twisting in his gut, sharper than any knife. Cousin. Blood, thinned by years and choices, but blood all the same. Tate had been a kid brother figure once, tagging along on family rides before the war pulled Jax away and ambition warped the rest. Now whispers painted him as the architect of Willow Creek's underbelly, a man who shielded predators under the banner of protection, pocketing scraps from the broken lives he was sworn to mend. Elias's uncle fit the pattern, a low-rung enforcer, dumping strays like Elias to clear the ledger, feeding the machine that chewed up the vulnerable for profit. And Lena, her end, that slick-road accident, suddenly loomed larger, a ghost refusing the grave. They climbed the steps, the door groaning open to reveal a lobby stale with the scent of stale coffee and bureaucracy. Yellowed flyers curling on bulletin boards, a fan whirring lazily overhead. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with pinched lips and glasses perched on her nose, looked up from her desk, her eyes narrowing at the intrusion of leather and grit. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice clipped, fingers hovering over a phone, as if weighing a call for backup. Jax stepped forward, Elias close at his side, the boy's free hand clutching the edge of Jax's vest like an anchor. "Harlan Tate," Jax said, his tone even, carrying the weight of roads traveled and oaths unbroken. "Tell him Jax Harlan's here. Family business." The word hung in the air, laced with irony that tasted like dust. The woman hesitated, then buzzed an inner line, her gaze flicking to Elias with a flicker of unease. Recognition, perhaps, of the boy who'd slipped through their net. Minutes stretched like taffy, the clock on the wall ticking with deliberate slowness, each second amplifying the hum of tension. Rocco leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his presence a silent deterrent to any hasty moves. Finally, a door swung open down the hall, and out stepped Harlan Tate, tall and lean, his suit crisp but his eyes hollow, like a man who'd traded soul for polish. Grey streaked his temples, but the smirk was pure memory, the one he'd worn when outsmarting cousins at cards. "Jax," he drawled, extending a hand that Jax ignored. "Heard you were back in town. And with company." His gaze slid to Elias, calculating, then back to Jax, probing for weakness. "Save the charm, Harlan," Jax replied, voice low and steady, the gravel of command underscoring each word. He guided Elias forward, the boy's unseeing face turned toward Tate's voice, serene amid the storm. "This kid, Elias, his uncle left him on the road last night like garbage. You know anything about that?" The question landed like a thrown gauntlet, the lobby's air thickening, the fan's blades slicing through the silence. Tate's smile faltered, just a twitch, but Jax caught it, the tell of a bluff gone sour. "Uncle's troubles are his own. We handle cases through channels. Boy's safe now, isn't he? No harm." He glanced at the receptionist, who busied herself with papers, avoiding the fray. But Elias shifted, his small hand tightening on Jax's. "You're the shadow," the boy murmured, loud enough for all to hear, his voice carrying that dreamlike clarity. "The one she warned about, hiding what you took." Tate's face paled, the color draining like oil from a leak. "What the hell's this? Some game?" He stepped closer, looming over Elias, but Jax moved instinctively, placing himself between them, a wall of scarred resolve. The vipers straightened outside the glass door, their silhouettes a promise of loyalty that needed no words. "The drawing," Jax pressed, pulling the folded paper from his vest, unfolding it just enough for Tate to glimpse Lena's face, those eyes accusing now in charcoal. "Boy drew my wife. Dead 15 years. Said she spoke to him. About fire dying out, about shadows in this town taking what's not theirs. Sound familiar?" The office seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in with the weight of unearthed truths. Tate's eyes darted to the drawing, widening in a flash of something raw. Fear. Guilt. He recovered quickly, straightening his tie. Superstition. Kids blind, probably his stories. Lena, that was a tragedy. Road was wet, brakes failed, nothing more. But his voice cracked on her name, a fissure in the facade, and Jax leaned in, the scent of Tate's cologne, sharp, artificial, clashing with the honest sweat of the road. "Brakes failed," Jax echoed, the words tasting of old lies. Lena had confided in him nights before her end, her voice soft by the firelight, whispers of audits gone missing, funds for the shelter vanishing into Tate's reforms, kids like Elias funneled away for foster fees that lined pockets. She'd planned to expose it, her moral compass unyielding. The accident followed swift as a shadow. Now, with Elias's vision bridging the gap, Jack saw the threads connecting. The uncle on Tate's payroll, the abandonments feeding the system, the corruption rooted in family betrayal. "Your family, Harlan," Jack said, the words a blade wrapped in velvet. "That means something. Or it used to. Hand over the files on the uncle, on every kid you've protected lately. Or we ride this public. Vipers don't forget promises." Tate's jaw clenched, his hand twitching toward his desk drawer, but Rocco's shadow loomed larger through the glass. A reminder that justice here wore patches, not badges. The cousin exhaled sharply, defeated for the moment. "Back room, 5 minutes." He turned, leading them down the hall, the door clicking shut behind like a reluctant confession. In the dim office, files spilled across a desk, cluttered with notepads and a flickering computer screen. Names, dates, fates blurred into anonymity. Elias's fingers brushed the papers, tracing edges as if reading Braille secrets, while Jax sifted through, the air heavy with dust and deceit. One folder caught his eye. Elias's uncle, linked to a string of relocations, payments traced to shell accounts. Deeper in, a yellowed report on Lena's accident, brakes tampered, witnesses silenced. The pieces locked, a puzzle of greed and loss, igniting the fire Elias had spoken of. But as Jax pocketed copies, a low rumble built outside, not bikes, but sirens, distant yet closing. Tate's eyes gleamed with sudden cunning. You stir this pot, Jax. It boils over. On all of us. The threat hung, moral lines blurring in the face of institutional teeth. Jax met his gaze, unyielding. Then we ride through the steam. For her. For him. Elias nodded, a small smile breaking through as the first wail pierced the town. The confrontation had cracked the surface. Now the depths stirred, pulling Jax toward a redemption forged in truth's unforgiving light, with a blind boy's impossible gift as his guide. The engines would answer soon, thundering against the gathering storm. The sirens wailed closer, slicing through the stale air of Harlan Tate's office like shards of fractured glass, their Doppler shift echoing off the brick walls of Willow Creek. Jax Harlan's hand tightened on the stack of pilfered files tucked inside his vest, the paper crinkling softly against the leather, a tangible weight of buried truths now unearthed. Elias stood motionless beside him, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, unperturbed by the escalating chaos, as if the boy's inner world buffered him from the storm brewing outside. Tate leaned back against his desk, arms crossed, a predatory glint in his eyes that betrayed the facade of composure. The room smelled of ink and tension, the computer's hum a mocking underscore to the approaching authority Tate had undoubtedly summoned. Backup's here," Tate said, his voice a silken thread laced with venom. "You and your road rats think you can waltz in and upend the order. This town's mine to protect, my way." He glanced at Elias, the boy's serene face a silent accusation, and for a split second something flickered in Tate's expression, regret, perhaps, or the ghost of shared bloodlines. Jax had known him as a boy once, wide-eyed and eager on the back of an old dirt bike, dreaming of justice before the system twisted him into its cog. But promises broken cast long shadows, and Lena's death had been the first fracture in their fractured kin. Jax didn't flinch, his stance rooted like an ancient oak against the gale. "Protect? You're the one hoarding the lost for scraps. Lena saw it, kids vanishing into your system, funds siphoned while families crumble. She paid for speaking out." The words hung heavy, pulling the air taut, and Elias's hand found Jax's, fingers intertwining in a grip that spoke of unspoken vows. The boy had drawn her from dreams, bridging the void, and now that bridge led straight into the heart of corruption. Outside, the Viper's engines idled low, a protective growl vibrating through the floorboards, Rocco's silhouette visible through the blinds as he coordinated the brothers with subtle nods. The door to the lobby burst open, flooding the hall with the sharp scent of patrol car exhaust and authorities' false bravado. 2 deputies stormed in, uniforms starched, badges glinting under the fluorescent lights, their boots echoing like judgments on the linoleum. "Sheriff's orders," the lead one barked, hand resting on his holster, eyes sweeping the room. "Step back, Harlan. This is official business." Tate straightened, slipping into the role of beleaguered official, his earlier smirk resurfacing like oil on water. "Appreciate the quick response, fellas. These gentlemen were just leaving, trespassing with accusations." Jax's jaw set, the fire Elias had spoken of kindling in his chest, warm and unyielding. He wouldn't raise a fist. The Vipers rode on honor, not havoc. Instead, he pulled the drawing from his pocket, unfolding it with deliberate care, holding it aloft like a banner of truth. Lena's charcoal eyes stared out, capturing the deputy's attention, their bluster faltering at the sight. "Look familiar?" Jax asked, voice steady as a horizon line. "My wife. 15 years gone. This blind boy drew her last night, said she warned of shadows like your boss here, stealing what's sacred." Elias tilted his head toward the voices, his presence a quiet force, drawing the room's focus like gravity. The lead deputy hesitated, his gaze flicking between the sketch and Tate, a crack forming in the wall of protocol. Whispers of Lena's legacy lingered in Willow Creek, her volunteer work at the shelter, the way she'd rallied the town against neglect before her light dimmed. One deputy, younger with a fresh shave and eyes that hadn't yet hardened, shifted uncomfortably. "Heard stories about her," he muttered almost to himself. Tate's face darkened, stepping forward to snatch the paper, but Jax withdrew it smoothly, folding it away. "Files we took," Jax continued, nodding to the hidden copies. "Proof of relocations that smell wrong. Kids like Elias funneled for fees, uncles paid to discard them, Lena's accident report in there too, brakes tampered, witnesses gone quiet." The accusation landed like a skid on loose gravel, the deputies exchanging uneasy glances. Tate lunged verbally, his voice rising. Lies, fabricated by a grief-stricken drifter and his pet mystic. But the seed was planted. Doubt rippled through the room, the fan's lazy spin amplifying the silence that followed. Elias spoke then, his voice soft yet piercing, cutting through the din like a clear desert dawn. "She said the fire starts with truth. Yours is out, Harlan, but his—" He pointed unerringly at Jax. "It's waking." The words carried an ethereal weight, evoking Lena's own unshakable moral code, the one that had bound Jax to her through canyons and storms. Rocco pushed into the doorway, his bulk filling the frame, the other vipers close behind, their leathers whispering, chains jingling faintly, a brotherhood etched in scars and shared roads. No weapons drawn, just presence, the unyielding loyalty of men who'd chosen family over fate. "We ain't here for trouble," Rocco rumbled, eyes locked on the deputies. "Just answers, for the kid, for all the forgotten." The standoff stretched, seconds ticking into eternity, the sirens outside now silent, patrol cars blocking the street like hesitant guardians. The younger deputy lowered his hand from his holster, a subtle shift toward the side of quiet justice. Tate's composure cracked further, sweat beading on his brow despite the air-conditioned chill. "You ride out now, Jax, and this ends quiet. Butch it, and the whole club's under scrutiny. Old warrants, traffic stops, family ties won't save you." The threat was a hollow echo, laced with the desperation of a man cornered by his own shadows. Jax met his cousin's gaze, seeing not the enemy, but the boy he'd once protected on sunlit trails. "Family's what we make it, Harlan. Lena taught me that. You forgot." With that, he turned, guiding Elias toward the door, the vipers parting like a sea of chrome and resolve. They emerged into the blistering afternoon light, the sun casting halos around the assembled bikes, their tanks reflecting the town's faded facades like mirrors to hidden sins. The deputies followed at a distance, radios crackling with uncertainty, but no arrests came. Yet Jax lifted Elias onto his bike, the boys' laughter light as they revved away, the convoy trailing in a thunderous wave that shook the windows of the protector's office. Dust billowed in their wake, a veil between past betrayals and the road ahead. The files burned against Jax's chest, a map to deeper rot. More names, more lost souls tied to Tate's web, echoing Lena's unfinished fight. As they crested the rise out of town, Elias leaned forward, his voice carrying over the wind. "She said thank you for riding." Jax's eyes stung, the horizon blurring not from speed, but from the redemption unfolding. A promise reignited, family reforged in the fire of truth. The vipers pressed on, engines harmonizing in a symphony of loyalty, toward allies in distant chapters and the moral reckoning that awaited. Shadows lengthened behind them, but the light ahead burned brighter, guided by a blind boy's impossible vision and a leader's unbroken word. If this story is stirring something deep in you, hit that like button. It helps spread these tales of honor and heart to more riders on the road. The canyon walls rose like ancient sentinels under the fading afternoon sun, their red hues deepening to blood as the Iron Viper's convoy carved through the twisting road. Jax Harlan led the pack, the Harley's engine thrumming beneath him like a heartbeat synced to his own resolve. Elias's small form pressed against his back, the boy's warmth a steady anchor amid the whipping wind. Dust trailed behind them in swirling vortices, carrying the faint metallic bite of overheated brakes from the chase they'd shaken off in Willow Creek. The files from Tate's office weighed heavy in Jax's saddlebag, their edges sharp against his thigh. A bundle of yellowed papers that mapped not just corruption, but the fractured remnants of a life he'd long ago surrendered to the miles. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in strokes of molten gold, Jax signaled the pull-off at a secluded overlook, a gravel turnout overlooking the vast sprawl of the desert below. The Vipers followed suit, engines cutting to a chorus of sighs, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant call of ravens and the soft crunch of boots on stone. Rocco dismounted first, his broad frame casting a long shadow as he scanned the horizon, ever the sentinel. "We got eyes on us back there?" he asked, voice low, pulling a battered thermos from his pack and pouring steaming coffee that smelled of dark roast and road-worn resolve. Jax eased Elias down, the boy's feet finding the earth with unerring grace, his fingers brushing the rough bark of a nearby juniper as if greeting an old friend. Deputies hung back after the first mile, Tate's playing cautious. For now. He accepted a mug, the heat seeping through the ceramic like a balm against the chill creeping in with twilight. The group gathered in a loose circle, leathers creaking, patches glinting faintly, the serpent flame emblem a unifying thread among these men, each one a veteran of battles that left scars deeper than skin. They'd ridden together through sandstorms and betrayals, forging bonds that outlasted the chrome they polished. Elias settled on a flat rock, his head tilted toward the group's murmurs, absorbing the rhythm like a melody only he could fully hear. Jax knelt beside him, unfolding the top file under the dimming light, the paper whispering secrets as he traced the ink with calloused fingers. Names leaped out, dozens of them, children like Elias, marked as relocated with signatures that looped like nooses, Harlan Tate's at the bottom of each. Payments funneled through shadowy accounts, uncles and guardians compensated for services rendered, a system preying on the lost under the veil of protection. Deeper in, Lena's report, the accident detailed in sterile prose, brakes severed clean, no investigation pursued. "She was onto this," Jax murmured, his voice rough with the gravel of suppressed fury. Volunteering at the shelter, piecing it together. Tate shut her down before she could light the fuse. Rocco peered over his shoulder, his breath fogging the page in the cooling air. "And now we're the spark. But riding against your own blood, that's a heavy chain, boss." The words hung, laced with the weight of Brotherhood's honesty. Jax had led them through bar fights and border runs, but this was personal, a moral quagmire where family ties tangled with justice's blade. He glanced at Elias, the boy's unseeing eyes fixed on nothing and everything, a faint smile curving his lips, as if Lena's whispers still echoed in his ears. "She chose us," Jax said finally, folding the file with deliberate care. "Blood don't make kin. Promises do." The decisions settled over the group, like the encroaching dusk, a pact renewed in nods and shared glances. Calls went out then, phones buzzing to life, voices crackling over lines to allied chapters scattered across the southwest, the desert hounds in Nevada, the steel eagles up north. "Need eyes on Tate's network," Jax instructed one grizzled contact, the line hissing with static. "Files show a trail, kids vanishing into foster mills for profit. We ride at dawn, link up at the old crossroads." Affirmatives came back, engines promised, loyalty a current stronger than any wire. These weren't just riders, they were the chosen family, pieced from the wreckage of wars and wanderings, bound by the honor of keeping one's word when the world forgot. Night fell fully as they camped, a fire crackling to life in a ring of stones, its flames dancing shadows across faces etched by time. The scent of pine smoke mingled with the earthy tang of the desert floor, stars wheeling overhead like distant witnesses. Elias drew closer to the warmth, his fingers sketching idle patterns in the dirt, swirls that evoked winding roads and coiled serpents. "She showed me more," he said softly, breaking the comfortable hush, his voice carrying over the pop of embers. "The shadows reach farther, a big house by the river where they hide the taken ones, but the fire..." It spreads if you lead. Jax's chest tightened, the boy's words stirring the embers of his own buried vow. To Lena, on their last ride together, her head on his shoulder as the canyon winds sang. "I'll protect the lost, like you protect me," he'd promised. Naive then to the cost. 15 years of running had dulled it, but Elias's drawing, this impossible bridge, reignited the flame. He ruffled the boy's hair, the gesture tender, fatherly in its simplicity. "We lead together, kid. Vipers don't ride alone." Sleep came fitful for Jax. Dreams haunted by Lena's smile and Tate's hollow eyes, the file's revelations twisting like backroads in fog. By pre-dawn, the camp stirred, coffee brewing anew, bikes checked with the ritual care of warriors arming for a just cause. The convoy reformed under a sky bruised with promise, engines roaring to life in a symphony that echoed off the canyon walls, a thunder of redemption, not rage. They rolled out as the first light crested the east, Elias secure behind Jax, the wind carrying whispers of sage and steel. Miles blurred into purpose, the road leading toward the riverlands where Tate's web extended, a sprawling estate whispered of in the files, Riverside Haven, a facade of charity masking locked doors and silenced pleas. Allies joined en route, bikes merging from side trails like tributaries to a mighty stream, the serpent flame multiplying across backs and tanks. Rocco rode flank, his gaze vigilant for tails. But the morning unfolded clear, the desert's vastness a canvas for their moral charge. As they neared the river's bend, the air grew humid, carrying the faint, loamy scent of water and hidden decay. The estate loomed on a rise, manicured lawns belying the iron gates, a place that promised sanctuary but delivered chains. Jax slowed the lead bike, the convoy halting in a disciplined arc, dust settling like a veil. No storming the walls, this was justice's measured step. "We talk first," Jax said over the idling rumble, dismounting to approach the gate. Elias at his side, the boy's hand a talisman against the unknown. A security guard emerged, uniform crisp, radio crackling, another cog in Tate's machine. "Private property. State your business." Jax held up a file copy, Lena's accident report visible, its edges frayed like old wounds. "Business with the Protector. Tell Harlan his past is knocking." "With proof." The guard's eyes widened at the name, hesitating before retreating to buzz the line. Minutes stretched, the river murmuring below like a conspirator, until the gates creaked open, not in welcome, but warning. Inside, the grounds unfolded in deceptive calm. White-columned buildings, children glimpsed through windows, their faces pale echoes of Elias's innocence. Tate waited on the porch, flanked by more guards, his suit rumpled now, eyes shadowed by a sleepless night. "You don't quit, do you?" he called, voice strained, the morning light casting him in harsh relief. Jax advanced, the Vipers a silent phalanx behind, their presence a tide of unyielding loyalty. "For her," Jax replied, stopping short, Elias's grip tightening. "For all of them. The files end here, or we make sure the truth rides free." Tate's facade cracked, glancing at the boy, then the horizon where more engines approached, reinforcements, the web tightening. The air hummed with tension, moral lines drawn in the dust, as Jax stood firm, the fire fully kindled, ready to burn away the shadows, one promise at a time. The reckoning had arrived, not with violence, but the quiet power of honor reclaimed, a blind boy's vision lighting the way through the gathering dark. The gates of Riverside Haven swung inward with a metallic groan that echoed across the manicured lawns, the humid river air, thick with the scent of blooming jasmine masking something sharper. Fear, perhaps, or the undercurrent of secrets long confined. Jax Harlan stood at the threshold, his boots rooted in the gravel drive, the sun filtering through the estate's overhanging oaks to dapple the scene in fractured light. Elias clung to his side, the boy's small hand a steady pulse against the storm of uncertainty, his unseeing eyes lifted toward the voices as if tracing invisible threads. Behind them, the iron vipers formed an unyielding line, engines ticking cool in the midday heat, chrome catching glints like drawn blades held in check. Rocco's gaze swept the perimeter, his hand resting casually on his belt, a silent vow that the Brotherhood would not yield. Harlan Tate descended the porch steps slowly, his polished shoes scuffing the flagstones, the weight of his rumpled suit pulling at shoulders once held high. Flanked by 3 guards, broad-shouldered men with radios clipped to their belts and eyes hardened by paid loyalty, Tate stopped a few paces away, the river's murmur a distant underscore to the standoff. His face, gaunt under the relentless sun, betrayed the night's toll. Shadows pooling beneath his eyes, a faint tremor in his clenched jaw. "Jax," he said, the name slipping out like a reluctant confession, laced with the gravel of shared history. "You bring your circus to my door. For what? Old ghosts and a kid's scribbles?" But his glance flicked to Elias, lingering a beat too long, as if the boy's presence stirred echoes he couldn't silence. Jax met his cousin's stare, the files in his vest a burning reminder against his chest, their pages heavy with names that screamed of broken trusts. The estate sprawled before them like a false paradise, whitewashed buildings with cheerful murals of playing children, yet the windows held bars disguised as decorative grills, and the laughter from within sounded rehearsed, hollow. Lena had described places like this in her final weeks, her voice soft by the glow of their cabin's lantern. Havens turned cages, where the vulnerable were warehoused for federal dollars, their stories erased to feed the machine. "For the truth, Harlan," Jax replied, his voice steady as canyon rock, carrying over the faint hum of approaching engines from the tree line, more allies converging, the web of loyalty expanding. "These kids aren't wards, they're prophets. And Lena, she died trying to stop it. You know why her brakes gave out." Tate's laugh was brittle, cracking like dry twigs underfoot, but it died quickly under the weight of Jax's unblinking resolve. He gestured vaguely at the grounds, the jasmine-scented breeze ruffling his tie. Tragedies happen on these roads. Lena was passionate. Too much, maybe. But this? He waved at the convoy, the viper's patches gleaming like badges of a higher law. "You're chasing fairy tales. The boy, Elias, he's just a case file, relocated for his own good. His uncle did what was best." The lie hung in the air, tainted, and Elias shifted, his free hand rising, as if to paint the moment in the space before him. "She said you're drowning in the river you built," the boy murmured, his words clear and unhurried, slicing through the tension like a pure note in a discordant storm. "But you can still swim back, for her sake." The guards tensed, one stepping forward with a hand raised, but Tate halted him with a sharp gesture, his eyes locking on Elias with a mix of dread and dawning recognition. The boy's voice carried Lena's cadence, the quiet conviction that had drawn Jax to her, across smoke-filled bars and starlit rides, her moral fire a beacon in his shadowed world. Tate's facade splintered further. He rubbed his temple, the river's loamy breath stirring the leaves overhead. "How does he?" he whispered more to himself, the question trailing into the humid air. Jax pressed forward a step, the gravel crunching under his boots, closing the gap without aggression, only the inexorable pull of justice. "Because she's still here, Harlan, through him, through us. Hand over the ledgers, the real ones. The ones showing where the money goes and where the kids end up, or we walk these grounds ourselves, and the truth rides out on every engine from here to the border." From the tree line, the rumble grew, tires on dirt, the growl of Harleys joining the fray, desert hounds' patches flashing as 24 more riders crested the rise, their arrival a thunderclap of solidarity. Rocco nodded to them, a subtle signal rippling through the ranks, the air vibrating with the collective hum of restrained power. Tate's guards exchanged uneasy glances, their radios silent for the moment, the estate's isolation no longer a shield. The protector's face paled, the sun's glare turning his skin ashen, and he glanced toward the main house, where faint cries echoed. children's voices real now, piercing the illusion. "You don't understand," Tate said, his voice dropping to a hoarse plea, the cousin emerging from the official. It started small, budgets cut, corners trimmed, then it snowballed. "Lena," she poked too deep. The accident wasn't—" He faltered, the admission hanging unfinished, a crack in the dam of years. Jax's heart twisted, not with triumph, but the ache of fractured blood. The boy he'd raced bikes with under summer suns, now adrift in his own moral desert. Yet promises demanded more than pity. They required action, the quiet sacrifice of facing one's shadows. "Then make it right," Jax urged, extending a hand not in threat, but offering a bridge across the chasm Lena's death had carved. "Shut it down, free them, or the Vipers will. For every name in these files, every loss like Elias—" The boy nodded beside him, his presence a living testament, the impossible drawing in Jax's mind, vivid as fresh ink, Lena's eyes urging redemption, not ruin. Tate hesitated, the river's current seeming to pulse through the grounds, carrying whispers of what might be washed away. He turned toward the house, signaling the guards to stand down, their postures easing fractionally as the weight of numbers and honor pressed in. "Inside," he muttered finally, leading the way up the steps, the porch creaking underfoot like old bones giving way. Jax followed, Elias's hand secure in his, the Vipers trailing in measured steps, a procession of leathers and resolve entering the heart of the beast. The foyer opened wide, polished floors reflecting the chandelier's soft glow, walls lined with framed certificates of care. But the air held the faint institutional tang of confinement, undercut by the patter of small feet from hidden halls. In the study, a heavy oak desk dominated, drawers yielding under Tate's reluctant key to reveal ledgers thick with deceit, columns of figures, destinations blurred but traceable now, names crossed out like erased lives. Jax sifted through them with Rocco at his side, the pages rustling like confessions, while Elias perched on a chair, his fingers drumming a rhythm that evoked winding roads to freedom. "It's spreading," the boy said softly, as if sensing the shift. The fire. Outside, the Allied riders encircled the grounds, not invading but watching, their engines a low hymn of vigilance. Tate sank into a chair, head in hands, the mask fully shed, a man confronting the cost of forgotten oaths, the corruption that had stolen his kin's light. As copies were made, hasty but thorough, the first children emerged, timid figures guided by a shaken staff, their eyes wide with the dawn of possibility. One girl, no older than Elias, clutched a worn doll, her gaze finding the bikers with tentative hope. Jax knelt to her level, his voice gentle as worn leather. "You're safe now. We ride for the lost." The words echoed Lena's own, a promise renewed, weaving redemption into the fabric of the moment. Tate watched, silent, the river outside flowing onward, mirroring the tide turning toward justice. But as the sun arced toward evening, casting long shadows across the lawns, a new rumble stirred, not allies, but enforcers from deeper in Tate's web, headlights piercing the tree line like accusatory stares. The moral fire burned bright, but the storm gathered, testing the bonds of chosen family and the unbreakable word of a leader guided by ghosts and a blind boy's light. The ride pressed on, toward the final reckoning where honor would claim its due, one shadowed soul at a time. The enforcers' headlights sliced through the gathering dusk like predatory eyes, their engines a guttural snarl rising from the river's bend, closing on Riverside Haven with the inevitability of a noose tightening. Jax Harlan stood on the porch, the humid air clinging to his skin like a second layer of resolve, carrying the mingled scents of jasmine and exhaust, sweet promise soured by intrusion. Elias pressed close, his small frame a quiet bulwark against the encroaching shadows, fingers laced through Jax's as if weaving an invisible shield. The ledgers lay open on the desk behind them, their pages a testament spilled in ink, routes of exploitation traced to distant cities, funds diverted like stolen rivers, names of the lost now reclaimed. Tate slumped in his chair, face buried in his hands, the weight of his unraveling empire etching deeper lines into his brow, a man adrift in the wreckage of his own making. From the grounds, the vipers and their allies stirred to life, desert hounds merging with steel eagles in a seamless phalanx, bikes forming a perimeter that hummed with restrained thunder, chrome barriers against the tide. Rocco's voice cut through the tension, low and commanding over the crackle of radios. "Hold the line, brothers. No sparks unless they throw the first." The air vibrated with the Brotherhood's pulse, leathers shifting like whispers of wind through sagebrush. Patches of serpent flames flickering in the torchlight the riders kindled along the drive. Children gathered in the foyer now, a dozen or more, their wide eyes reflecting the fire's glow, faces pale from confinement but kindling with the spark of freedom. One boy clutching Elias's hand in tentative solidarity, as if the blind child's light drew them all forward. Tate lifted his head, eyes hollowed by the dying sun, meeting Jax's gaze across the porch's worn boards. The river murmured below, a ceaseless flow mirroring the confessions bubbling to the surface. "I didn't start it," he rasped, voice frayed like old wiring. "But I let it run. Lena, she saw the rot first, warned me in that shelter office, her eyes like yours now, burning clean. I silenced her to save the job, the town. Thought it was for the greater good." The words tumbled out, raw and unpolished, the cousin's mask shattered, revealing the boy Jax remembered racing through dusty fields, dreams untainted by greed. Elias tilted his head, his unseeing focus piercing the dusk. "She said the river washes clean if you let it," the boy said softly, his voice a clear thread amid the growing roar. "You're not drowned yet." The enforcers crested the rise. 6 black SUVs, tires churning gravel into dust clouds that billowed like vengeful ghosts, their arrival shaking the oaks and sending leaves spiraling earthward. Guards from the estate shifted uneasily, radios hissing with urgent commands, but Tate rose unsteadily, waving them down with a trembling hand. "Stand easy," he called, his authority cracking but holding, the first step toward reclamation. Jax watched, the file's weight lifting fractionally from his chest, Lena's drawing tucked safe in his vest, a talisman pulsing with her quiet strength. No guns drawn, no charges clashing. This was the moral front, where truth's engine outpowered any horsepower. The lead SUV braked hard, doors slamming open to disgorge suited figures, hard men with earpieces and clipped tones, extensions of Tate's deeper web, faces set in the cold efficiency of preserved order. Their leader, a wiry operative with a scar tracing his jaw like a fault line, stepped forward, eyes scanning the assembled riders with calculated disdain. "Tate, report. These outlaws yours?" The question hung, laced with the metallic tang of threat, the river's humidity amplifying the standoff's sweat-slick tension. Tate straightened, drawing a breath that seemed to pull from the estate's very foundations, his voice gaining steel from the abyss. "Change of plans, shut it down, all operations. Call off the relocations. These—" He gestured to the vipers, the children peeking from the door, Elias at the center like a lodestar. "These are the real protectors." The operative blinked, confusion rippling through his ranks. But Tate pressed on, pulling a ledger from the desk and thrusting it forward. "Everything's here. Funds, routes, the accidents. Lena Harlan's too. It ends tonight." The admission echoed, a dam breaking, the river's flow now carrying away the corruption's silt. Jax's throat tightened, the scene blurring at the edges. Not from dust, but the swell of redemption's tide. He knelt beside Elias, the boy's warmth grounding him as the enforcers hesitated, radios buzzing with higher calls, the web fraying under the weight of exposure. One by one, the suited men lowered their guards, phones lighting up with reluctant compliance, the SUV's engines idling down to whispers. The children ventured out fully now, tentative steps onto the lawn. their laughter tentative at first, then blooming like dawn over the canyon, pure, unshadowed. As twilight deepened, painting the sky in bruised indigos, Tate approached Jax, the porch steps creaking under his faltering weight. I owe her, us, an apology that words can't ride far enough. Take the kids. I'll testify. Dismantle it all. For family. His hand extended, not as foe, but kin reclaimed, scarred palms meeting in a grip forged from loss and light. Jax nodded, the fire in his chest steady now, no longer a flicker, but a blaze shared. Tears traced silent paths down his cheeks, hot against the cooling air. The breakdown not of defeat, but release, the impossible drawing's promise fulfilled, Lena's spirit woven into the living tapestry of chosen bonds. The convoy reformed under the emerging stars, engines purring to life in a harmonious roar that scattered the last shadows. Elias climbed behind Jax, arms wrapping secure, the children distributed among willing riders, small passengers on a journey to true homes, the serpent flame guarding them all. Tate watched from the porch, a solitary figure silhouetted against the house's glow, the river carrying his redemption onward. They rolled out as one, dust trailing like a benediction. The road ahead open and endless, winding toward healing canyons and unbreakable oaths. Miles melted into night, the wind whispering of sage and steel, Elias's head resting against Jax's back, a quiet symphony of trust. The blind boy's vision had pierced the veil, not just of sight but of souls, igniting justice's moral engine, binding a leader's tears to a legacy of honor. In the vast desert expanse, the iron vipers rode eternal, family chosen, promises eternal, the fire undimmed. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. These stories of heart and honor mean the world when they reach you. If they've touched something deep, hit that subscribe button and join the crew for more tales from the road, where the serpent flame burns bright.